Might be a blessing in disguise.
Hey, you're here. You want to join?
All right.
Jump in.
All right.
All right.
We are supposed to be on TV.
Yep. If Jamie's ready, we'll go ahead and get started. Great. Thank you all for coming to the Public Safety Building Committee meeting. And I did not think I was going to get back in time from Vermont, so thankfully Ray and Mary have prepared some information and are prepared to help facilitate tonight's meeting. So I'm not going to steal their thunder, but I'm going to turn it right over to them. And I believe Mary's going to first share some introductory remarks, and then we're going to let Ray facilitate the conversation, and we will all join in. And thank you all for coming this evening. Appreciate it.
Hello. Greetings. In talking with Ray about tonight's meeting, it occurred to me that this would be a good juncture to summarize from what point we go forward from here. So I prepared a few remarks. Tonight we'll be discussing various design solutions for a building or buildings for our public safety departments and rough cost estimates associated with them. For community members present at this meeting, as well as those who are viewing at home, the nature of the data under consideration should be explained. First, the designs. The building design solutions are concepts derived entirely from existing information available from last year's proposal at town meeting, viewed in respect to the sites that have not been eliminated from consideration in the last 6 months. They take into account the particular features specific to public safety buildings, which are not simple office-style buildings. For instance, a police station needs reinforced interior walls in some areas for security and toilets in which detained persons are not able to commit suicide, among other things. A fire station must accommodate living areas as well as emergency response space. The specific characteristics required for each department are well documented, if not well known. Secondly, in regards to the price figures that we will be discussing, the numbers the committee will discuss are rough cost estimates provided by two sources. First, a community volunteer who's experienced in construction of these types of buildings, working with members of the committee, and secondly, from a firm under retainer to the town as a result of its involvement in last year's proposal that has contact with the committee through our town administrator. These numbers are guidelines only for straw poll type ranking by the committee of different approaches to solving both departments' needs. These numbers are not part of a bid process. No new contracts have been entered into. No work that has been provided to us in any way favors one solution over another, nor does it favor in any way any contractor, architect, or engineer over another. When the time comes, and this is really important for people to understand, When the time comes to take bids for any contractual work associated with the building of a new public safety facility for the town of Plymouth, those bids will be sought after, considered, and awarded not by this committee, but through the appropriate channels of town administration and government. And so I think it's just a good starting point to understand that we had to have some numbers to work with. They're rough numbers. They have been provided to us pro bono, and they are not contractual. Having said that, I'm going to turn the rest of the meeting over to Ray, who has prepared a summary matrix of the numbers in relation to the sites that are still open for review.
Thank you, Mary. Part of this summary matrix that everyone has in front of them is extracted from the 4 meetings that we had in October. You have had provided to you electronically the draft minutes that Mary has prepared of each of those 4 meetings. And it's my expectation, because there has not been any feedback, that those minutes will stand as they're presented, unless there's a subsequent comment that comes out of our review tonight, perhaps it causes us to want to amend what we now have in front of us. If you refer to the table that's on a legal size document, and reflecting on last week's meeting, I made sure that we made it large enough so we didn't have to squint to try to read the information that was on it. The table is laid out so that we've identified those options that we still have in front of us, and you'll note that there are 5 options that are there. For reference purposes, we've also listed the warrant article that was presented in March's town meeting of this year. The first 3 options are ones that are associated with Lot 209-24 on Route 3. That's the lot that's adjacent to the existing police department site. The 4th option is provides for a standalone fire department, a 2-story facility that's located at 42 Highland Street, which is the existing fire department site. The 5th option is a standalone police department option that came to the table just last week. That's at 334 Main Street, and essentially it's the existing police department site, but that the location of the facility would be to the left of the existing facility. You have 4 program matrix columns there. The first 3, all 4 have been drawn from the extensive matrix that we did several months ago. The first 3 were the first pass that we did through that matrix, the program fit, the access/traffic analysis, and the response analysis. The 4th one is the estimated overall development cost, and as you just heard Mary say, these are the rough costs that we're using to get a ballpark sense of what each of these items will cost to actually develop. And if you'll recall, that includes everything from any site acquisition cost to site development work through actual construction of the facilities themselves. We have continued the use of the rating scale of 1 to 9. The numbers that are already on the table are ones that the committee had previously assigned to options in our previous dialogues. Where you see blanks, such as in HH1 and HH2 under response, is where in reviewing of minutes and the information from previous tables, I could not ascertain where we had actually assigned a rating factor for the response for a facility which consisted of a combined police and fire department or a standalone fire department located on that lot 209-24. The cost numbers that you see over there are the ones that are part of the estimates that have come to us on a volunteer basis. The blank number that is assigned with option II, and I know it looks like some kind of 11 or something like that, but that's actually II. I probably used the wrong font there. But that's a number that we're looking to actually get a cost figure on. Before we dig into the table and the discussion on that, Peter has alerted us to the fact that he does have some additional cost information, and I think this would be a good point to turn it over to him and let him share what he's brought to us this evening.
Two things. Number one, the handout, I'm going to give him a handout. It's 11 by 17, you need to squint, but the information's there. And also, I've got, working with the local resident for a pro bono basis, pricing out the other option for the police facility adjacent to the existing police facility with a parking lot based on the plan that Paul presented.
That would be II.
That'd be I. Now I've got another version of that too. We're trying to massage that a little bit, moving the police station over, adjusting the parking to save on some of the cut and fill and ledge removal. So I've got another number here to consider.
Thank you.
Actually, oh. And similar to what we did before.
And you were supposed to strike Kia, and I forgot to tell you.
Oh.
I know it's just on the spreadsheet.
I think on the last pass, we'll sort of clean things up and get things presentable.
I was supposed to tell you that, though, if I didn't. Oh, it's okay, sorry.
Also, backup information for the site development costs are spreadsheets. And that also includes the past sites were considered. I don't think it's necessary to go through the site numbers. They get to be pretty confusing after a while and pretty detailed. On that spreadsheet, on the spreadsheet, and Jeff Downing from CCI had put that down as HH, as a modified version of the site plan that Paul presented last week or 2 weeks ago, moving the station really directly next to the existing station, within 10 feet or so, and massaging the parking around it just to mitigate some of the cut and fill and ledge removal. And the number he came up on that, and Dick would like to have you take a look at that too.
If I could jump in just to
Sure, go
help
ahead.
out so we can quickly make an adjustment. Looking at the sheet that Peter just distributed to you from the bottom up, the first option from the bottom up would be II1, actually, excuse me, II2. Next up would be II1. The next item up remains GG. The next item up that is currently labeled AA3, just change all the AAs to HH. And that'll bring us both tables in line.
And Mary just mentioned to me too, we'll also strike the Kia site from this chart.
Correct.
Um,
Thank you, Peter.
So HH1, again, is a standalone police station built directly adjacent to the existing police station, massaging some of the parking once the existing police station is torn down. And that total came to wishful thinking, $2,719,000. Pretty much taking the site plan, again, that Paul had presented, which has the building on that same side as the police station, but somewhat removed, with parking surrounding it. CCI came up with an estimate of $3.362 million. And the obvious difference between the two is excavation and ledge. And also, Jeff said he included a number that he thought was somewhat liberal for the ledge removal, and he's worried that it might be, and he had a range from whatever he had in that estimate that could potentially be another $400,000 more than that. And he put the low number in.
You put the low number in.
He put the low number in.
For
For
II2.
II2.
So it could run up to 40,000.
Again, depending on what you find underground, ledge,
Exact- yes,
and what
right.
you assume from the ledge and the
But
borings.
that was the number you said.
Yes. And Paul, I'm sort of curious about if you have a number to compare to that for II2.
I just looked at a price from who we used last year, 2.8 million.
II1.
No.
No.
The one that I was supposed to get, the one that, the sheet that Ray passed out.
The standalone police department
Standalone police department,
at
right.
the existing site. And they came up with
2.8.
2.8 compared to the 2.7, so pretty close.
No,
3.62.
compared to the 3.62.
Did they by any chance come back
Do you understand that, Dick?
No, I don't.
I didn't follow
either.
that.
I don't get it.
Okay. The number that came up last year was 2.8 million?
And that's RII.
That's RII1.
Whatever this got changed to just now, where the blank is,
Yep.
and then you see it 2.8 million.
Right, and we have 2719297.
Two different
Right.
variations on it, and it was,
So it's close.
The thing with the last year's number for a facility, and the other thing that
no, it's this year's number.
that's a
They-
revised
we asked them to-
okay,
We asked them to relook
last
at
year's
this.
design with this year's number.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's crystal clear. Last year's design, this year's number is 2.8 million.
And it lines up against the 2719297.
I'm not-
The verbiage stays the same, they would also like the opportunity to massage their numbers.
Yep.
This is,
Well, again, this
That's
isn't
an-
a bid
that's an
process,
estimate.
it's just,
this is SDA too. This is SDA.
correct.
Yeah.
Hey, can I just get a clarification, Paul? So that number 2.8 is based on a massage site plan?
The plan they had last year, right?
Plan he had last
And they had
year.
Last year.
Okay.
Last year.
So technically then, you're comparing the 3.3 to 2.8.
Yep.
So there is a difference there.
Not if what I, okay, then can we just go back and clarify? I have that II1, that II2 is the massage site.
II2 is the massage site.
And that's at 3362?
That is the same, so this should be II2 on Ray's sheet here.
Yes,
Should be II2.
it could be. Could be either I1 or we could add another
No.
column.
Well, let's
You
just,
can't. It
let's
needs
just
to be
clarify it.
II2.
yeah.
The-
It needs to be II2 because that site included removing the ledge.
Yes.
So it needs to be II2.
You mean the first one after GG, you're calling II2? Is that what you're saying to me?
Calling that II1.
Yeah, I have that.
II2 is on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ray's indication starts at the very bottom as II2, then it's II1,
Yeah,
then it's GG,
yeah.
and then all the rest, the A's go away and H's go in front of them.
So the question is, the revised numbers from the firm retained by the town, are they lining up with II1 or II2? That's the, II2. I asked the question long enough.
Describe again the physical characteristics differences between II1 and II2. I am not clear on that.
Okay. Are you familiar with the site plan that Paul presented 2 weeks ago?
I am.
Okay. So that's II1.
Mm-hmm.
II2 is basically taking the same facility, basically mirroring it, so the Sally port's on this side, and moving it over to here.
Okay.
Once the police station, existing police station is torn down, is basically utilize this whole building pad, plus some, for parking layouts, and get away from some of the parking and access on this side. So it's basically moving it over and using that for parking, and leaving this portion untouched, unblasted.
And to accomplish that cost another $500,000.
Referring to,
Well,
Jeff,
remember that now you've added an entire demolition project, restoration of that site, and the building of parking. So this, when you simply place it here with adjacent parking, you have ledge removal, but this building can sit there or not sit there. You know, that would be the choice of the town. But
That's
in
correct.
effect, it can stay there and
be used for other purposes or what have you. So
Under II1.
under, right, so by massaging it, you've added costs because you're cleaning the site, but you're removing a building, and it strikes me that I don't think we want to consider removal of buildings as part of our plan unless we have to.
Which takes me back to, are we not then really comparing the revised figures to II1?
No, because.
Since
SBA's
II
plan included removing the building as well.
No.
No, it doesn't. That's what I'm trying to get at, is I believe,
Scenario,
Basically, it's this.
This is, this adjacent
so it's
building.
II1.
With no demolition required of the existing building is the comparator.
That's II1.
So then those numbers, once again, we're comparing 2.8 to 2.7, not,
Wait, why is the 3.62 where ledge removal is required?
because you're removing a building, right?
Is the removal of the building
Ledge.
included in that
The
3.362?
ledge.
No, with CCI doing the estimate for II, I'm gonna get confused on this stuff. II1, basically this site plan,
Yep,
it's the added cost for ledge removal and blasting.
so it's less expensive, because II1 was the 2.719.
And that's the cheaper of the two.
Right. So that's the ledge removal one?
Yes,
That's
that-
not
No,
Peter
no,
said
that's
originally.
SDA's.
I know. That's why I'm looking at the schematic over here, which you guys aren't. If you look at the schematic, if Peter describes II1, you're taking the schematic that we worked off last week. The cost of accomplishing that, including any site work, is $2.7 million.
Okay, so it's more expensive to flip-flop the
Yes, ma'am.
Because
ledge.
it includes the demolition.
Which is $540,000 more expensive.
Yes.
Let's,
Maybe not.
let's start over again.
Yeah.
Then the explanation of the site work is not in line with the cost.
This site plan here is II2, correct?
No.
No, we're asking
That
you.
site plan is II1.
All right, this is II1. His estimate is 3.3 million.
Okay, those are the numbers that are, okay, then, okay, those numbers are backwards, okay.
And the, apparently II2 is taking this building on this pad, mirroring it, Sally Port adjacent to the existing police station. Once that's built, take down the existing police station and use that for parking. And that is the 2.7 million.
So the figures that you've got on this sheet, instead of being II1 and II2, they're II2 and II1. Is
Correct. Now, when you read from the bottom up on this sheet here, the 11 by 17 sheet, if you make it match the matrix that Ray prepared for us, and you read from the bottom, II1 is the bottom number, 3362430 and 14 cents. II2 is right above that, and that's 2719297 and 10 cents.
And the difference between the two is basically ledge removal and site work.
Except SBA says it's 2.8,
That's correct.
and we say it's 3.3.
So, in some ways, it'd be interesting to have either a discussion between the two firms or at least an analysis of the breakdown.
Well, I think since Mary said that these are rough ballpark estimates that you're using to guide your decision, these don't represent the bid process or anything like it.
Correct. They're just
Then
decision factors.
This is just for you to make your decision about which is the best site and choice.
Two variables that I just wanted to ask about, Peter, and we may or may not know, but, so in the plan that you're now describing as, or we are calling II1, no, I'm sorry, II2, is the demolition and removal all part of that cost projection? It is. So it's, in comparison, then it's lower money, and all those other costs have been included.
That's correct.
Yeah, but there's the question that needs to be cleared up, I guess, from town officials is, were you anticipating the removal of that building, or were you anticipating that building remaining for whatever purpose you wish to have it, or do you have any thought about that? And maybe it's not one you can answer tonight, but because if you want that building to remain, then I would suggest we don't waste any more time looking at any plans or proposals that call for its removal.
think that's probably the wise course, because, I mean, that's a decision that, you know, that it might be something that the building can be sold. It might be more valuable to the town to sell as an existing building, or, you know, there might be other options. And we also need to have the police department occupying that building while any new facility is being built, because otherwise we'd have to find temporary housing for the police department.
It sounds like from Peter's description, the Sally Port may or may not be accessible if the building is under demolition. But I think your plan was they would move into the
Yeah,
adjacent building.
once the new building's complete, they'd move out and then demolish the building. As an option.
And the demo cost in this budget is $14,000, so that's really not a significant number.
Right.
Yeah,
And the site, and that building ultimately would have to be demolished. I mean, you need that land, you need the space. The building's got to go when the new facility is constructed, I would think. What do you think, Chief?
I think you're right.
Let's get 10 minutes. Yeah. For clarification purposes,
Yes, please.
when we're communicating outside of ours, what's the most effective way to describe the project for II1 and II2, looking at that second column? We had trouble getting clear ourselves. What's the most effective way to describe that project? Looking for any suggestions.
Give it another number.
No, I don't want a
under-
number, I want a written description.
If
So-
I understand
So that I
it,
meet somebody on the street, I can describe it.
let's see if I understand it.
I think the best way to do it is, and we talked about this before, is use the PID numbers.
No, no,
209, boom, and.
That's location.
that's different.
Describe the project.
Because there's multiple projects on that same
Well,
location.
then you can go to your 209, 251, 251, 252, 253.
We've already done that under location. Describe the project, the actual activity
So
that's
Mary
taking
wants to take a
place.
stab. Let's let Mary take her
All right,
stab,
please,
and then
thank
we'll
you.
all see what we
Well,
think.
with all the notes I've been taking and the listening I've been doing, and this will be interesting, because if I haven't heard it right, then, you know, what are the chances anyone else has? II1 is the project that does not remove the existing building and that follows,
It's in the
II,
budget.
okay, let me just summarize. II1, which is a 3.3 million, the existing police station remains, and basically it's built per this site plan.
Mary's right.
that's what I just said.
Okay, right.
II1 does not remove the existing building.
So we're off, right?
II2 removes the existing building, moves the proposed facility over towards the location of the existing building, and then makes use of the land on which the existing building is to create better and more accessible parking. Did I get that right?
Pretty much right.
Okay, what's wrong with it?
I wouldn't say.
Yeah, but I mean,
I
that's,
wouldn't
Yes,
use
it-
the word move because it doesn't exist. I would say it situates the facility, take
So-
advantage of parking.
so II1 leaves the building in place and II2 takes it away.
I would just use that as the thing.
Okay.
Now, backtracking a little bit too, because this is something, just working with Jeff,
Before you go to that,
Yep.
Ray, you said the bottom one, II, was going to be II2 and HH was going to be
That's-
II1.
That's
That was
changed now.
That is now changed.
That has changed.
Yeah.
HH is II2,
yes.
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
Whoa, no,
Yes.
What are you saying HH for?
That second one at
Because
the bottom was
on-
originally
on-
HH.
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you.
So then there's also some demolition costs, I assume, that shouldn't be in one of those. You've got the same demolition costs for both of those two projects currently.
He might have included that in both.
So you were assuming then that even though you didn't need to tear down the building in one, that it would be, just because as is
To be
already
honest with you, the
been-
architect didn't do his due diligence and go through the numbers beforehand.
Okay.
He just assumed Jeff. But question, me to backtrack a little bit further, is do we want to consider that as an option? Because that's something working out with Jeff, trying to minimize costs as best I could, is that was another consideration I thought might be worth looking into. And I'm not
Well,
sure
I
if the
think
committee-
I think we need some direction. I think ultimately we're going to need some direction as to, do you want a plan that involves and includes the removal of the building, or do you want that left to your discretion after all is said and done? I've heard the chief say and others say the building should go, and perhaps that close proximity would be challenging to separate it and sell it for other use, but I think that that's a town resource decision. You know, it's a piece of property that the town owns. So if you want it as part of this project, just after all is said and done, gone, we ought to probably roll it in and take care of it. On the other hand, if
Mr.
ultimately...
Chairman, I think we can jump over that, because if the budget, if we can agree that $14,000 will make that building go away, then we can add that to the 2.8 on SDAs that they don't have in there, and we're okay. I mean, the numbers we're talking about, that's not a significant impact.
Yeah, it's just that one plan requires the building to be
Yes.
gone, and the other does not. Yeah, so if the decision is made we are not to tinker with that asset, then that will eliminate the one plan that requires the building to be removed. But
And the only caveat,
That's something that, for one, is going to have to be a full select board
Correct.
discussion and decision. And if you follow what was decided last week, that is, the committee can give
Multiple
your
choices.
best option to the select board, then if you can narrow it down without even thinking about that, then you'll be giving us what we asked for.
can I just say one more thing too, but order of magnitude?
Peter, Dick, and Chief Clarkson.
Sorry, Chief. Order of magnitude, the demolition sort of scenario is not just $14,000. If you look at the two, the big sort of difference lies with the ledge removal. And theoretically, ledge removal, trying to estimate quantities underground that you can't determine, is a variable thing. And maybe Paul's estimate and CCI's estimate, you know, are not comparable, and they could both go up or down dramatically, because we don't know. So 14,000 is a small cost, but the big cost is in ledge. So if you go the direction of not tearing that building down, that's order of magnitude is that ledge cost.
Dick.
I forget where I was, but
Why don't you hold it, I'll let Chief chime in, and then you
Go
may
ahead.
have come back to
Yeah,
you.
let him go.
Casino?
can I approach it?
Certainly.
All right. Sitting back there listening, and I'm not beating a dead horse. But on the general notes, under II and HH, it points out the difference in the two. Both plans apparently look like they plan on demolishing the building. One plan requires the building site to become a parking lot, the other one does not.
Correct.
Okay, that just,
Oh, yeah, I pointed that out, the demolition cost. Thank you, though, for double checking us. Yeah, I noticed the same thing, and it's a due diligence. Peter indicated that it just should have been removed from the one that doesn't require it, but ultimately the town may decide as part of this project, you know what? We just ought to get rid of the thing, you know, and then regardless of whether it's needed for the space, but that'll ultimately be a decision. And again, the only reason I bring it up is there's no sense keeping that plan. Right now, we have a plan that we have two separate pricing structures that are being developed. Now we have a new plan that doesn't have a second pricing assessment, and it requires the removal of the building. So I guess even though it appears that it could be cheaper, it may just be easier to clarify, and let's not get into two different variables there if there's no great significant advantage to one over the other. And as Dick's pointed out, the demolition costs are pretty insignificant if that number is accurate. So I guess I would prefer not to tinker with the asset at this point and let the town decide how they want to manage that and move forward on the plan that just
But
doesn't.
for argument purposes, we can say the demolition cost is in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to do, because we're just trying to put a package together here.
Yep, exactly.
And the bottom line is, and I hope the Board of Selectmen and the town fathers and ladies do this, we've talked about it. Once we get the budget number, a site, and a plan to present, and we invite the general contractors to present, RFPs. We put out an RFP, and they'll come in, and they will have, based on our criteria, they may make it a little smaller, a little larger, they may move things around, the site may change a little bit, but the reality is, that's what you have to consider. We can't call it a bid because we don't have any, we're not specifying anything.
No, and
We're
it's not a
just
bid.
specifying a space, and we're specifying, how many trucks are gonna be in the fire station, but we're not specifying, you know,
Yep.
furniture, hardware, anything like that.
Well-
And we need them to do that.
Yeah, and based on that too, it strikes me that we probably don't need to spend a lot more time debating the two at this point. I think that we're better off to move along Ray's thoughtful agenda here. And Ray, did you have more that you wanted to present on these
Yes, I do.
options? Okay, please.
First off, just a drill down question. Peter, I noticed that on the cost sheet that you distributed, that you show the square footage for the standalone police department's alternatives we just discussed at 9880. I was wondering why that came down from previous discussions of 10,080.
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
When I got the spreadsheet from Jeff, he had put in 98.
All right. Because that leads into something we're going to accomplish here a little bit later on. The other thing we need to accomplish, we've had a great deal of discussion, and a number of people have pointed out that the response time, if you have a fire department facility, whether it's standalone or combined, located on or around the existing police department site, that there is less than an ideal solution in terms of response time, coming back into what is understood to be the main needs within the heart of the town to respond to fire emergencies or rescue emergencies. And we need to actually assign a rating under HH1 and HH2 under that response column. You'll notice that we believe that the standalone fire department in the existing location carries a value of 9. And having listened to both the fire chiefs and others' comments within the fire department over the last several months, it appears that it's less than a 9 for those two alternatives. So it's somewhere less than a 9, and my personal belief is it's somewhere above 5. So my question is of the committee, what is the ranking that we should assign for response?
Well, I have a question on and I marked it on the sheet tonight, is the access and traffic. They're all rated as 9s, which is the highest. Well, access is one issue and traffic is a second issue, and Highland Street again, and we've talked about this. Every response that the fire department has ever done goes through the busiest urban areas of the community. Fire and ambulance, they're the busiest streets. Highland Street, you have the college, the hospital, and the school zone, okay? That street is heavily trafficked. It's probably one of the heaviest traffic roads in town. That delays response. It also creates hazard to the public, to the traveling public. Main Street, the same thing. If they're going out of town, if they're going north up Route 3 or even south down Route 3, they have to go through the main street, all right? That's hazardous, and it delays responses, and we talked about this. When the fire station was built, Highland Street was Tenny Mountain Highway. Highland Street was Route 25, the only east-west road through town. It made good sense to do that. But the criteria today, and I've said this before, I'm on record as saying it, it's published data, it's not what I'm saying, but they're talking about response times aren't really the drivers. You need to site the station where it can provide the best response for the majority of the community, not only today, but in the future. And that's why I think Highland Street is wrong. It's unsafe to respond from there. It creates a hazard every time we do. As far as the volunteer firefighters coming in, you can change your management practices and not have everybody go to the fire station. They go directly to the scene. There's things that can be done there. And I'm just wondering how we get to 9 for traffic when we discounted putting a standalone police station on Highland Street for just that reason. That was one of the purposes. I think the chief agreed that it's, the school traffic there in the morning in the afternoons creates huge issues. And we have the distinct possibility, in fact, it's an actuality, it's happened, is that we can have emergency vehicles responding in both directions on Highland Street. We can have an ambulance coming in from Rumney, going to the hospital, and we could have a fire apparatus going out and going through the school zone. It's hazardous and it's dangerous.
Dick, I guess I need to inject at this point that we've had this dialogue, and when we had this dialogue with the discussion you just reiterated, the view of the committee was it was a 9. So this is not new information. We've already weighed that information, and we rated the existing site as a 9.
Well,
I know you don't believe in that, but that was the view of the committee, that we previously rated at 9.
One of the things, and we are revisiting, and I think it's going to be understood that throughout this process, not everyone is in 100% agreement on every variable, and so you're well stated on that. I am going to break from our normal tradition slightly because we have obviously experts in the audience and people that have been with us from the get-go and have seen us rating all these. So I'm actually going to do a straw poll on these numbers from the 5 of you that are joined us tonight. So I hope I don't put you on the spot. You're welcome to abstain if you would like, and the committee will vote as well. But I'm curious to see what everybody's vision is, because we've heard some conflicting information on some variables of this. So I think your goal, though, is what I'm hearing you say, Ray, is we need to assign response ratings to these two. Dick is suggesting something that may be interesting. Should we divide access and traffic and try to add a ranking for each of these sites, one on traffic, one on access? Do they mean the same thing? Do we feel like they mean the same thing? Or is there a distinction between them? And I don't know that there is. Access is, to my mind, proximity to the largest, most predominant number of calls that are made in any given year. To me, that's the access point. And the traffic variable is, you may be where all that stuff happens, but is it really the best location given traffic patterns for you to be for the overall picture? And I think that's what Dick is saying as well. We have heard from the chief and from others and from some past reports that the site of the current fire station is the best site given the density and the call volume that we have. Future, we know, is unpredictable. We know that the future predictions that were made have not been achieved. So sitting here and trying to think too much about that, I think, is a futile effort, personally. The question is, will that site serve our purposes? And Casino, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard you say that that's the best spot for all, on average. I'm not saying it's going to be the best. There's always could be a variable that could affect anything. But the reason we didn't put the police station up on Highland Street is because it would be in the middle of Highland Street and could easily get locked in there. The advantage of the current location of the fire station, as we've talked about before, is there are multiple egress points. There are multiple roads in that area that could be used to avoid the downtown if you needed to cut. Yes, you're cutting through residential neighborhoods, but the frequency of that's pretty limited. But I guess the question I'll get back to, do we need to divide this, or do you simply are we ready just to pick response numbers for those two? I'll ask the committee for your input. Mary.
I think it's often possible for two things to be true at the same time, and that this conversation that we keep having about advantages of location serving broader geography versus location serving density of calls, both of those things are always going to be true, and that really the work ahead of us is to figure out what the departments need and what reasonable solutions to them are. And I think that which of those truths is the most important will fall out at the end rather than getting caught on it now, I think. But
again, remember, we're not coming up with a solution. So I think personally our direction's been very clear. A solution, an option at the existing fire station site is a responsibility that we have to bring forward. And if ultimately the select board chooses to go in a different direction based on other additional information, that will be their choice. But I think we've been pretty clear through this process and we have a viable option, albeit I did have a question. Does that include whatever the remote storage cost would be for some of the rarely used pieces of apparatus?
No.
Was that in that? Okay,
It
so
did not include
there
that.
will need to be some calculation.
That's worth talking about further, too.
Yep.
What we really do truly need.
Likewise, we do know as well that all of the sites, all of these plans, at least to date, required the continual operation. If it's not at the existing site of the fire station, requires the continued operation of the fire station as an annex of some sort for call response. But again, that's been said enough. So let's just see if we can come up with this a number for those two blanks, which is what Ray's ultimate goal was. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Can I say one thing?
Yep.
Is when I came up with that matrix, that had a lot of different criteria in there.
Yep.
I assumed we were going to have a multitude of different sites and options. It's sort of boiling down to a few here. If any of these criteria is a make and break, it just doesn't work in that location, or it just doesn't fit, or whatever, that's part of our due consideration. But whether the Highland Street is a 9 or a 7, I don't know, it doesn't really matter too much to me, because I don't think we're going to take a summary at the bottom line and say that anything under 27, 26 drops out.
I don't disagree with you, but just because we've been so diligent in following a matrix analysis, to have 2 holes as we get ready to go into a presentation on this and be asked, well, why do you have 2 holes there? I think let's just fill the holes. Let's just plug them in.
7.
7, we have a motion for a 7.
For
7
for
on-
HH1?
HH1?
Yes, and HH2.
So we have one person suggesting a 7. Discussion. Other recommendations.
Well, I would go with an 8, and the only reason I wouldn't go with a 9 is because of the chief saying that he liked the location on Highland Street. I mean, that's the only reason I wouldn't give that a 9 up there, because I figured that access and all that is equivalent to what we have in Highland, but since the chief feels that this is a good location for it, that's the only reason I put it down to
It'd be interesting hearing the chief's ranking on that.
Yep, well, that's why I'm going to do a straw poll in a minute, but let's get the committee's thoughts out there first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Butch. I think that there certainly will be times when one will be faster than the other, based on a set of calls, but we continue to hear that the predominant number of calls, that the current site is still the best site, but I still think on average, I think it deserves an 8.
I'm gonna say 9.
Okay, so we've got a 7, 2 8s, a 9. Mary,
I'll give you an 8.
8. Ray, what's your preferred opinion?
7.5?
Ever the diplomat. All right, so it appears as though we're in the ballpark of an 8 at this point, 7 to 8, with 1 9 strongly stated and respectfully accepted. Let's start with the Chief Clarkson. What's your assessment or rating, if knowing our matrix as for the site up by the current police station?
For response tables and all that,
This is response variable. Yeah.
I'd have to say 7.
7, okay. I'm open for straw votes. What do you guys think? Patrice?
I think it's a 7 for police and, 7 for fire and 9 for police.
Good, thank you for reminding us that in that one, since it's a joint
It's
facility,
joint.
there are 2 ratings. That's good, thank you. You guys want to not weigh in or weigh in?
7 and 9.
7 and
7 for fire, 9 for police.
7 and 9, okay. Val? That's fine. Chief, you want to play with us?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just gonna see if we can make a motion of a 7 and a 9. 7 for fire, 9 for police. Anybody want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
So 7 for, I just want to make sure I get
7
this
for
straight.
fire.
7 for HH2,
And-
which is
and-
standalone fire, and
What would HH1 be?
Yes, it would be 7 for both.
HH1 is a
for
split.
fire.
Both HH1, HH2, and on HH1, it would be a 9 for police, and it's irrelevant for the police on HH2. So that's our motion, 7 and 9.
I'll second that.
It's been seconded and seconded twice. All those in favor of that ranking, please signify by raising your hand. All opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries by a vote of 5 to 1. So noted, so recorded, the matrix is completed.
The only other thing that I would suggest is that this table now would perhaps present information in a more favorable fashion. Obviously, the only alternative on there that has the combined facility is HH1. Any other solutions for both police and fire require combinations thereof. My suggestion is that those alternatives, I'll take a pass at just pairing them all up so that you can see what the various alternative pairs would look like from a standpoint of both program fit, traffic access, response, and also cost. I think you also can take a quick look and scan this and come up with the understanding with the rankings that we just did, that you are again finding the two alternatives that were mentioned last week as tending to float to the top, consisting of a standalone fire department on the existing site in combination with a standalone police department, depending on the characteristics that the select board may want to have and the way the site is fulfilled, is either II1 or II2. Is meeting all of the service requirements the town perhaps would expect from these two departments, along with the lowest cost to achieve those services. And it's going to be over $1 million less than what was presented to the town last year, no matter which solution we end up.
But it doesn't fit.
So noted, Dick.
You've got 4 truck bays and a fire station that you can't make any longer. You can't get the trucks in. John was right. John is absolutely right. We shouldn't be designing a building to fit the lot. We should be designing a building to fit the need. Doesn't make the need. We still have to add to it. That's a
Respectfully asked, Dick, since you've been noted and recorded and others have, and we're going to be presenting more than one option to the town to consider. So if that variable also is troubling enough to them as they make those final considerations, they won't choose it. And I think we're going to have to put our faith and trust. We've given them every piece of information I think anybody could ask for. And there are certainly limitations. You're well noted, and it's duly noted and duly entered in all of our minutes and records. Peter?
There's, wait a second.
Could
I just acknowledge Peter first?
Yes, I'm just trying to keep up with what's
Okay,
being
a
said. I'm
records-
sorry.
A records, no, that always takes a point of order precedence, thank you.
I think what I just heard is that II1 or 2 and GG is the pair that you were talking about, Ray. Am I right about that?
They appear.
They appear to be a good
floating to
pair.
the top.
And that's the pair that you object to based on the fit of the GG, the fire station at 42 Highland Street.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. I just want to,
And
thank you,
what I
that's
think Ray
fine.
is suggesting, he's going to try to now go back and work these in terms of
Because that isn't the only
combinations.
pairing you can come up with.
Right, he's going to
so
try to work
obviously, yeah.
multiple combinations and then come back with a spreadsheet that does the combination of the figures and the combination of the variables and
Some totaling.
do some totaling. So, thank you. Now, Peter.
Excellent. And Dick, I sort of agree with you, I think I massaged that program to fit on that site, and it does fit on that site, but there is some certainly from a site program standpoint, it's totally compromised. But again, I'm not sure if that's something that's ultimately a good thing or a bad thing, but it is compromised. And even the building too, there's some other considerations where it's not going to be part of your spreadsheet and just totals. From a building standpoint, it doesn't fit in the neighborhood. And maybe with some tricks and some design features, it'll help, but it's a big sort of urban solution for us, really a rural sort of site. So I sort of agree, at some point, we should make those comments too. And I've got another idea too, where is the sites on, now I'm getting confused, it's not AA, it's all H's now?
Correct.
Okay. All those took advantage of the flat area, the backside of that lot, placing combined facilities, or even though they're in the combined facility, there's some parking out front that is affecting the hillside, that is blasting and ledge removal potentially. But on all those solutions, in some ways, even though I sort of propose it from a site, from a cost standpoint, I don't like the building sort of removed from the main street. It's nice having, I think, a public building sort of fronting a public way. So, and I hate to ask it, is it worthwhile considering one more stab at things? Is take that combined facility, I think I did something similar to this in an earlier version, move it up to the street. You're probably removing the cost that's reflected here in that spreadsheet that CCI has done. Costs are probably going to go up. And
Can
obviously-
you say that again? I'm sorry, Peter. Should we
Um,
take the
talking about
combined
HH1?
facility, move it forward, and then what's going to happen?
Basically take the combined facility
Yes.
on that site,
Move
move
it
it towards the
forward.
street, so you have some presence and some direct cascading out for the fire trucks. It's going to affect the cost of ledge removal contrary to what was presented on that spreadsheet.
In which way?
It's going to, it's going to, well, I shouldn't say that. It's probably going to raise it. It's going to be a higher
By
cost.
adding costs, yeah, okay, thank you.
But is that something that's worth considering?
Well, or do we need to consider it? You know, I guess the question I ask is that once we decide that that is one of our choices to present, it does strike me that Dick's assessment earlier, that's when you're going to have somebody who's going to bid on this project come in and give you an RFP on the best way to accomplish your goals on that site. We're not going to be able to dictate that to them from our level of involvement and expertise. I would hate to try to do that. I mean, I think that they're going to come in and much as you're trying to do, they're going to look at the site and they're going to say, well, you know what? This would make more sense. And I hope that an RFP would give enough flexibility to a company to come in here and present creative options to do what you're
The scenario I'm
suggesting.
trying to avoid is, let's say that combined facility is moved out to the street, and we basically describe it. You go out to get RFPs or bids on that, and it comes in at 7.4 million. So do we recommend that scenario without knowing those kind of parameters up front?
I see what you're saying.
Or it comes in 7.3 million? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Good point.
Did
Well,
you,
the other thing we should do, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and the ledge is an issue, the excavation is going to be an issue on either one of those locations. And I think when the RFP goes out, that the excavation needs to be a stipulated price in the contract. That the contract will put the excavation number in for either rock, common excavation, or ledge. So those numbers can't change based on, I didn't know. If you understand. If you don't, we can talk about that later.
Yes, Paul?
I'd like to see the RFP written by the committee.
Excuse me? You want us to write the RFP? Seriously?
Honest-
Okay, so make sure you're not
I'd say there's
joking.
more experience on the committee for that type of RFP than there is for a warrant article. That's not expertise that would come out of the town hall for that kind of project.
Say that again, the
You wanna read
RFP.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it may be better to have, at that point, when we're ready to move forward, is to have an engineer sit down and draw it. Or an architect. and draw it out.
Oh,
Let's still defer it back to the committee.
Yeah, and we can look at it.
I'm not saying that we wouldn't take it and give it to our attorney.
can I say one thing? I wouldn't mind giving some recommendations from an architectural standpoint, or design standpoint, or a contract standpoint. You can certainly handle site parameters. I'm very familiar with all the pitfalls and change orders that potentially might come up during this process, and this scares me too, this ledge. And give you some suggestions and let you write the RFP, let them write the RFP.
So,
That would be-
a
I wouldn't mind.
generator. So, Paul,
I say we'd work with them.
Yeah.
yeah, so
actually, yeah.
it sounds like maybe it would be more of a collaborative effort rather than us write it, but we do have expertise here. Some of us don't have any expertise, in writing that RFP, so, and others do. So it sounds like they would generate recommendations, set of recommendations, and then take those forward to you, to the town, to, obviously you're the only ones who can legally, ultimately produce the RFP, but I think what I think I'm hearing you suggest is that you really don't want to have too many variables to look at. You'd rather have it narrowed somewhat. So if, Peter, you've got some idea that is able to be fleshed out and get some rough numbers on, so there's some distinction on that, but we are now getting into
The two of us, Dick, myself, and whoever else, we can
Okay.
offer some suggestions and some ideas to be
I
considered.
was going to ask Paul a question. You have an updated number for the standalone. Did they also update the number?
We're moving it forward.
Oh, wait, they already did for the
with that, yeah.
complete building, for the complex as presented last year.
They have another number that they're prepared to bring before the board of selectmen.
So they do have that number, yeah. Because, we're all looking at the reductions in the overall cost, but we still haven't really seen an estimate from SDA on what last year's proposed building as proposed would cost in today's dollars. Is that correct? Okay. Excuse me?
That would be a proposal.
I thought we had them under retainer still for that purpose, no?
Which would make it a proposal.
Which would make it a proposal to the select board, not to the committee.
So they're under retainer to submit proposals. But this is not a proposal? The 2.8? How can that not be a proposal? Oh, because it wasn't the ultimate bond issue?
It's not the bottom line. Remember I said they could still massage that number.
Okay, can they give us a number they could still massage on the contemporary? No?
I think they've done a pretty good job.
Okay.
Can I go back to this request for the committee to write the RFPs, because I think it's inappropriate. I think the committee's been clearly defined as a group of volunteers with different background expertise who were asked to study an issue and make recommendations to the board, and issues of staying away from conflict of interest have been raised a number of times during our proceedings. I took particular care tonight to outline that this is not a bid process, but, you know, we have an architect and a contractor sitting in this group, and to ask them to write RFPs that their firms might want to respond to is such an obvious, to me, such an obvious crossing of the line. I just don't, I think we should, look, we have broad numbers here. We have abundant input from the chiefs of our departments telling us what they need. We have good building concepts based on needs that have already been decided and confirmed in last year's proposal. And I just think we should look at some combinations that we think might work for the town, budget-wise and building-wise, pass those to the selectmen, and that they should really hire someone to write their RFPs if they don't have that expertise
But what-
in-house.
What I was talking about, and I think Peterson, you know, that there are some pitfalls when you write these agreements, all right? You know,
We can certainly make note of things we think ought to be taken into consideration, but
there are certain
that's
ways in which
different.
they should be presented in the request for proposal, so that we get, so that the group that is bidding are sort of bidding apples to apples.
Right, but I think that's not our job.
Well, what I'm saying is.
I understand your concern, and I know you want it to be thorough,
it
but
needs
if
to
we
be
don't,
fair. It needs to be fair when it's bid, and it needs
I agree.
to get to the best dollar. And-
so we
and
can
that's
make
what we're talking.
recommendations, but I don't think we should be writing the RFPs.
We're not gonna, we're just gonna, we're just
Okay.
gonna.
Paul, you want to clarify something?
I just wanted that to surface to the top.
Huh?
And Mary did an excellent job of explaining why. It has to come from the committee as a full group, but you can't ask the town hall or myself to write an RFP with a bunch of suggestions, because it would still be coming from the committee. We do write RFPs. If it's going to be some specifics that you want to make sure that we include those specifics to me as a committee.
It's a different request.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very different request than saying, I want the committee to write the RFP. So that's what I want to get straight here, is what you're really requesting is that the committee include in its recommendations any specific needs of which they think you need to be aware.
Not necessarily.
Because it wouldn't be any different if I ended up in my office tomorrow with committee members in my office trying to tell me how the RFP should look when it comes out.
And Mary, the word need isn't really appropriate. It's more, this is what you should be looking for. You know, this is what, is that right?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
And I don't
we've
mind,
got ledge numbers on the board go from $13 to $45 a yard, right now.
and what scares me, I've seen past ledge numbers going from, I think someone had 12,500 up to 3 million. I mean, the thing just scares me dramatically.
So
And I don't-
somehow you need to bracket that, so whoever's offering proposals just can't try and take advantage of that item.
And I would
Because
s-
once you open it up and say, let's go ahead, it could just blow up.
Oh, it could dramatically. And I don't think as a committee would normally have that expertise to go ahead and give recommendations to the town on that RFP controls, but I think I can help out as best I can. I think, Dick, you can even informally in your office or something.
Why don't
Do you,
we-
is that true of all of the H proposals? Is this aspect true of all of the H
And also
proposals?
the I.
And the
series.
II proposals? Then maybe they're not good things to propose if we can't define them, or if there's a Pandora's box.
We already did it last March.
Yeah, I know we did, and look what happened to it.
Yeah, but we're miles ahead of that right now.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Val, do you have something you want to?
Just, I want to say that I agree 100% with Mary. But I also think that you can't say the committee can make recommendations and then have specific committee members say, yes, I'm qualified to make that recommendation, and the rest of the committee may not be. So I think that, as Mary said, any recommendations made have to be the consensus of the committee.
Yeah, I was going to move to that. I would like to ask that Dick and Peter develop some of these recommendations and bring back to us to review. We are not going to be able to write the RFP. Only the town can write the RFP, but I think the committee should have an ability to look at them at least and hear what they are, and then they'll be included as part of our recommendations to the town.
Is that,
Okay?
is that how we're doing it?
Given that it's 6:05 now, I wanted to make sure, are people willing to stay a little bit longer so the chief could do the presentation that he's planned to do? Is that okay?
I can.
Yep.
On your agenda.
Chief Temporino. Chief Temporino is
Oh,
going
absolutely.
to. Yeah. So Steve, please, thank you for your patience, and we give you the floor. Oop.
I thought it'd be helpful to give the committee and maybe the public some historical perspective as to how we got to the footprint that is our proposal today. And really that started well over a year ago when myself, Captain Steve Lefebvre, Paul Fraser, and Brian Murphy went up to take a look at the Littleton Police Department after they had just completed their project. I think Littleton and Plymouth have a lot of similarities. Our police forces are relatively the same size, our communities are similar in dynamics. They don't have a student population we do. And the building was relatively new, and I wanted to see what had been done there. And this is what they came up with. We toured the facility. As you can see, there is a general lobby, administration. They have basically a large area for patrol officers to do their work with cubicles right here. All around the patrol area are all of the critical spaces. You have the prosecutor's office, the 2 command officers. You have sergeants who have cubicles right off the main area. You have a break room, an area for detectives to work in. They have a large area here, which is a moving wall. It's a roll call room, also can be a training room, also can triple as an emergency operations center. I also have men and women's rooms with showers. They have a storage area, armory area, a place to clean weapons. They have a sally port that will accommodate 4 vehicles, a cell block area, which has a space for 4 adults, and across the hallway, sight and sound separated, and we have 2 juvenile cells. In the middle is a booking or processing area, and across the hallway are areas for an intox machine to be run, a space for a bail commissioner to come in and out of the building without having to walk through the lobby. And in the lobby themselves, there are public toilets and accesses for the public to come in and out of the building. So this proposal was brought back to the committee at that point. The committee liked what they saw. They liked the footprint. And it was at that time that I and Captain Steve Lefebvre met with SDA and began to basically massage this footprint to fit our need in Plymouth. And what we came up with was this project right here, which is in your handouts. And it is quite similar. In fact, it's very similar. I would call it nearly a hybrid of the Littleton plan. Some of the major characteristic differences is Littleton does not have a communication center. They actually dispatch off of the county and their police department is closed after hours. Ours is open 24/7. We have an in-house communication center. We provide emergency police communications for 7 law enforcement agencies, and it's a revenue source for us. So in this model, you'll see a larger communication area. You'll see a space for 2 primary dispatchers as well as a supervisor office, which also can double as a dispatch position as well. There is a kitchenette in that space along with a toilet in that space as well. Right off of that space, you'll see an admin area where an admin assistant would work, and most of the administrative paperwork would be done in that building. That's all adjacent off to the lobby and the vestibule, which is the same as the Littleton model. As you travel down the hallway, like the Littleton model, you have the prosecutor, you have the second in charge, you have an office for the chief of police, and a small conference area for the chief of police. And like the Littleton model, there is a patrol area where cubicles would be set up where patrol officers would do their paperwork and type the reports as well. Like Littleton, you'd have 3 spaces for patrol supervisors or sergeants. I just want to point out that there's a typographical error here. The break room and the detectives area actually are vice versa. That larger space is our break room. That larger space is our break room. That smaller space is the detectives area. Similar to the Littleton model, there is a training room, roll call room, which can be divided by a moving wall, which also can be used as an emergency operations center. Unlike Littleton, we have a family crisis room. This is a space where we would interview victims of crimes, different levels of abuse. It's a different style interview room than, say, the interview room that we have over in this area right here. This interview is primarily what we would call a hard interview. We would interview suspects. We might have someone in a jail cell here that we want to take out, interview, and put back in a jail cell. Different environment. This is a place where we would, well, I think family crisis spells it all. It's a different environment. It would look more like your living room, and it would be a gentler, easier place to conduct an interview with a variety of special victims. Men's room, locker room, both complete with shower. Like the Littleton model, we have a supply area here. We have an armory, a weapons cleaning area. The storage area right here is a little different. We have a couple of extra doors in there. This storage area could also be used twice a year to plan for any incidents of mass arrest. We go into that system twice a year. In the spring and the fall, we always have events that could turn into a mass arrest scenario. That event is planned into our planning every year. That's very unlike Littleton. Littleton never has routine mass arrest issues. So this area could be a booking area. We could use a sally port as well as some of these areas here to take in a mass arrest situation. Like the Littleton model, we have both juvenile cells and adult cells separated by a corridor. We have 4 adult cells. Usually we like to separate men and women across from each other so they can't actually have any contact, and the same is true for adults and juveniles, which is actually a mandate. We have an area to run our intox machine. We also have an area for a bail commissioner to come in and out of the building without having to be let in the building as well. Originally, when we worked with this model, we had space for the welfare department. The welfare department has recently moved out of the police station, so this space right here is no longer relevant and could be eliminated or used at some capacity. Mechanical rooms, parking storage areas, miscellaneous usage of here, a janitorial area as well. 4-bay garage door, drive-in and drive-out, since we require a drive-around building. So that's our proposal. If comparing the Littleton model to the Plymouth model, in a nutshell, the Littleton model is a building that is about 145 by 64, which gives them an outside dimension of 9,280 square feet, or inside work area of about 8,797. So 145 by 64 is the outside dimension of the current Littleton PD. Our current facility right now is 140 by 60. That's about 8,400 outside diameter. The proposal, this proposal right here is 150 by 70, so that's 10,500 square feet as a proposal. So. Any questions on this at all?
I have a question.
Yes.
This proposal is 10,500 feet, and some of the numbers we have are representing square footage of, I think, I don't have them in front of me, is it 9980? Or?
9860, and that's the Littleton,
No, I'm going back to the sheets we're actually looking at here.
Oh, 98.
9,880 square feet, and I just wonder what you think about that difference, and whether you think it's significant, or...
Well, I don't think it is. I don't think it's that significant.
Okay.
These are some estimates, which we expect to
Okay,
work
so
with.
those can still be considered
Right.
within the realm of your needs as they were met in this
Right.
plan. Okay,
And
thank you.
The largest difference in the space would be in the communications area, the family crisis area, and I think the welfare area. So these areas, I think, probably caused some greater space needs.
Thank you.
Quick question for you. Sallyport, if you just pull in, because some of this configuration sort of dictates not a drive around, but just pull in on the end.
Right.
Is that
Is it
acceptable?
doable?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a program space, I think, when the building, when it was drive around, but driving in straight or pulling or driving through is totally doable.
Good, thanks.
Steve, could you just tell me with a four-bay Sally Point, what is your anticipated usage and need for four bays in the Sally Port area?
We have a 2-bay right now, and we have found that we try to keep as many vehicles in the side port as we can, even during the summer. The cars last longer, they're maintained better if we keep them indoors. So even when the cars are not in use, we would plan to keep them indoors as much as possible. So that's how we came up with the four bays.
So by, I guess, my normal definition of a Sally Port, it's more than just a traditional Sally Port. It's also for vehicle storage,
Yes.
interior storage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dick, do you have a question? No. Okay. Other questions for Steve? It's helpful to have an overview. It's been a long time, I think, since we walked through the plan like that. It'll help us as we start to talk a little more, in a more detailed fashion about the program and program fit. So, and it's good for anybody watching tonight to have a little chance to walk through that too.
Dick, I know you had a question last week regarding the spaces for the sergeants.
Yes.
And again, we revert back to the spaces we had up in Littleton. As you can see, these are very small spaces. They're actually 10 by 8, so that's a tiny little space. These are areas for sergeants, patrol supervisors to basically talk with their employees, talk with members of the public in a private format. Right now, we don't have that ability. Right now, I have actually a large space where I have 3 sergeants sharing one space. It's difficult to have a private conversation with them. So that's why we followed the Littleton model. And three sergeant spaces will actually work into the future. I know we have 3 sergeants now, but even if we had 6 sergeants, which is a very long ways away, they're not always working at the same time. And easily 2 sergeants, maybe even 3 sergeants could share one space because as they'd be coming in and out in shifts. So.
Well, it helped a lot for you to lay this out tonight, the whole scenario, because we hadn't really looked at the program.
Right. So this is our beginning. This is what our footprint is. And We expect to be working with you on nipping and tucking as we go along. This is it.
Patrice had a question?
I do,
comment?
thanks, Mr. Chairman. Chief, I was just wondering, how many juvenile cells?
Two.
Sorry, my eyes can't pick it up here.
Two.
Two,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions from anyone in the audience or on the committee?
Just an observation that having the chief run through this, for me, accomplished two things. Number one, it gave me a general sense as to why we're talking, give or take a little bit, around 10,000 square feet for a facility. And B, it helped me to understand enough of the functionality within that 10,000 square feet to understand that it meets most of the expectations that we can look for our police department to be fulfilling for the foreseeable future.
In visiting the Littleton facility, I spoke with the Littleton Police Chief about the size. I think they started around 11,000 square feet from the very beginning and ended up with whatever they ended up with. He was very confident that that footprint, which is roughly 10,000 square feet, will suit the needs of his community for at least 20 years, perhaps even more. One of the dynamics of a police department, which is different from a fire department, when fire departments get larger, because of, say, buildings that requires more equipment, a lot bigger trucks, that's kind of different from the police department. Additional personnel do not necessitate a larger building. People are coming in shifts. This building is probably a building that a 25 or 30 person police force could work out of it very easily. Again, because they're not always there at the same time. They come in shifts. So none of us will be alive when we have a 40-man police department in this community, I hope. But this building right here will suit the needs of our community for a very long time. And if it's placed in an added area, there's always room for expansion as well.
Now that they've been in there for about a year up there, have we had any contact with them, see if they do anything different?
You know, I haven't. I see Chief Smith on a regular basis in our meetings, but I could certainly go up and have a conversation with him and take a look around. In fact, one of the things when we toured it, it was before the grand opening, and the building wasn't fully operational. And I wanted to go there before the grand opening to get more of a private, intimate tour instead of with a large group. But we certainly can go back. In fact, it might even be a good exercise for this committee to take a ride up there. And I can arrange for a private tour of the building. You can get a very hands-on feel as to what that building looks like and how it feels. It's actually a rather charming building. It's a very New England-looking building. It has cement clapboards. I think there are some architectural features on the roof. It fits in nicely to that community.
Thank you. Any other questions for Steve? I think it would be helpful to replicate this for the fire department, and it'd be helpful for us to have a similar presentation just as a nice refresher as we start to get ready to take a look a little more closely at program and start asking more detailed questions about space utilization and needs and that sort of thing. If that's something I can impose upon you, perhaps for next week, Casino? Okay.
Maybe by next week I can get something and have a presenter come down. I can try to.
If we could have it next week, just because I think to keep it fresh in everybody's mind and about the same time frame, probably would be very helpful if that isn't too problematic for Tom, but I'll let you check with him. I don't want to impose too much. If it has to be the following week, we can do it that way as well.
Yeah, I'll check with him tomorrow and I'll give you an email.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We are at agenda items for the future. Now, I'd already noted the fire department a similar presentation, and I think we're pretty close to, I think we are ready to start really having more detailed program conversation. Whether we want to go to Littleton, we can put that on our agenda for discussion next week as well. I think there's spaces in some of these buildings that I think just for our knowledge as well as for informational knowledge for the community to know a little bit more about what actually happens in them, what are the functions of them. I made a note because I don't think I had in my head that we need a space in this building in the police station or some building to run an emergency operations center. And generally speaking, you always place those where you have power and communication ability. So,
The other good thing about that is if we have a police station.
it's Homeland Security money. Yep, exactly. So there are grant dollars available. Well, they have been anyway. We'll see what happens next. But Stephen?
Just one more thing about that. If we decide to go up to Littleton, that would be great, but if you'd like me to have Chief Smith come down here and talk to you about his building, I'm sure I can arrange that as well.
And I appreciate that. On the other hand, I think we have the experts for what the facility needs to be and look like and do. And having somebody tell us too much about how it works in their town, not that I don't respect that, but I think the space, and we've all walked through your station and we know the functions that occur, but we'll talk about, I'd like to ask the committee to think about that and kind of give me a sense if you think that's would be a good use of our time either way, to have their chief come down or us take a trip up, or Steve to bring a video camera when he goes up and give us a little video presentation. But
It does seem to me if our work is based on recently built and newly occupied facility in a similar community within an hour of here, that it might make sense to.
Well, I certainly think Butch's question was a great
that
one to
conversation.
ask you to follow up and see, what would you do different today? I mean, it's unusual to have the ability to ask that question of such a similar facility. So that's a great opportunity as well. So we'll put that on the agenda for next week. Anything else for next week's agenda? Ray will present to us his continued hard work on trying to make these little, I hate to make an advertisement for a Chinese menu, but we're going to sort of picking one from column A and one from column B and putting them together, and you're going to try to help us with that a little bit.
I will see that you have those in hand. I will not be present at next week's meeting. I'm having my knee surgery done on Tuesday, the day before. So. But I'll have the information to
Is
you.
it nearby? We could have the meeting in your room.
I'm sure Spear would love that.
Anything else for next week?
Yeah, one thing we have not done is basically take each of the sites and talk about it, the pros and cons. I think we've done it sort of piecemeal and hit and miss. But that should happen fairly soon, I would think.
Well, rather than talk, if I can dovetail into, use Peter as a setup, if you go back to our 16-point table that we established that we were using to look at each one of these, we only picked 3 of those 16 elements when we did our first pass. But at some point, perhaps it would be helpful to return to the matrix and do the analysis. So it's not a discussion, it's actually a review using the matrix.
The only danger doing that, and I don't want to take up a lot of time, if you have a large series of complex decision-making, a lot of variables, that makes sense. If it's boiled down to, how many sites are there? It's good for discussion purposes, but a lot of times discussing it, you'll probably glean more information and more comments and more information than just neighborhood fit 5.
I do think we're at a point where what I call qualitative analysis is in order, which is a little less numeric than this, because I do think we're going to need basically a pro-con list.
Yes.
We sit there and we kind of dusted into that a little bit, or touched a little bit tonight, and ultimately, it may just help, if nothing else, in our presentation. Here are the variables we considered. I imagine that every pro and every con that we don't list somewhere, somebody's going to mention to us. So I would prefer to try to go through that list as comprehensively as possible. That said, I think we need to look at which, now that we are to such a limited number of sites, are there matrix variables? And I would ask the committee to take a look at the matrix that we think are part of that discussion. So there may be a qualitative as well as a quantitative. Not all of those are particularly relevant any longer, because some of them are not even, they just make no sense for the sites we're looking at. So I think, and that's Peter's comment. Mary?
Yes, I'm not fixed in thinking that a numeric value has to be assigned to each of the categories on the matrix, but we did spend a long time talking about what categories should be considered, and I think at the very least our discussions and pro-con list should derive from and include everything that's on the matrix.
So what I'd ask the committee to do as a little homework assignment is, I just quickly skimmed this, and half of those could be removed because of the fact that we're down to so few sites now, and they're not relevant any longer, really. But I'd like to make that an exercise for next week.
I think that's a
which
good idea,
matrix
but just to go
variables.
through, and if you have a pro or a con in there, we established that as our method. We've led everybody
Yep.
through a process of site selection that narrowed it into just
Yeah,
just
and
seems like we ought to
it's-
follow it to some
And
extent.
maybe come prepared if there's, as opposed to just saying, I'll give it a 2, let's be prepared to talk about it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that if you go through first and we just determine that, there's only 6 of these that make sense to really focus on, and then we could do both numeric as well as reflections that gives us the qualitative as well as the quantitative. Great. Any public comment or anything from any great revelations, things we've missed in this long conversation tonight as we narrow our field and focus? Okay? All right, I call us adjourned then. Thank you all very much. Thanks for getting that stuff
I'll
ready.
send you an email. I see several of these that, no matter which one of these sites you look at, like utilities.